Perhaps the most valued form of intelligence in our society, the one that pays the most and the one that will make you the happiest, is called social intelligence. This comes from the extensive work done at Harvard University by Dr. Howard Gardner on the Human Potential Project. In his book, Frames of Mind, he explains that there are several different forms of intelligence, but that only mathematical and verbal intelligence are ever measured during your years at school. He points out that there is also artistic intelligence and musical intelligence, athletic or physical intelligence, and scientific intelligence. His conclusion on intelligence is quite remarkable. He suggests that everyone has a unique combination of different intelligences that make him or her exceptional and capable of performing in a superior fashion if their combination of intelligences and abilities are matched to their tasks and activities. What we'll focus on in this session is social intelligence, or the ability to interact, communicate, negotiate, and compromise effectively with other people. Since your interactions with others account for perhaps 85% of your success and happiness in life, it's well worth your while to do everything possible to improve these skills. The laws of negotiating tie in very closely to the laws of economics, and they're part and parcel of the same thing. Because each person places different values on different things at different times, everyone behaves economically in the sense that they always strive to negotiate the very best deal for themselves. Every financial transaction is based on the law of subjective value, where each party values what the other one has more than they value what they're giving in trade. In a free society like ours, commerce and trade only take place when each party believes that, based on their individual values, they'll be better off exchanging with the other than they would be if they didn't. When you negotiate, you're subject to the economic laws of minimization and maximization. You always want to get the very most for the very least, all things considered. Whenever you're buying, selling, negotiating wages or salaries, either as an employer or as an employee, or bargaining over the terms and conditions of a purchase or sale, you're negotiating in some way. In fact, all of life is a negotiation. From the time you're an infant, you negotiate for the attention of your parents by crying loudly, and you reward their attention by lying peacefully. Every child knows that love and kisses are a currency that can be traded for food, attention, warmth, toys, and other things, and children learn very early to trade this currency carefully. Since it's all they have to trade, so to speak, they don't spend it freely. In every relationship, there's a certain amount of negotiating and bargaining going back and forth all the time. Even when you drive from one place to another, you're negotiating through traffic, letting other people get in front of you and you getting in front of them. When you go to a restaurant, you negotiate, first of all, to get a table, and secondly, to get the kind of table where you'd feel most comfortable. It's not really a question of whether you negotiate. The only question is, how well do you do it? There are 12 laws of negotiating that you can learn and practice that will help you to get far better deals than perhaps you've ever gotten before. The first law of negotiating is what I call Nuremberg's Law, after Gerard Nuremberg, author of the book The Art of Negotiating. This law, according to Nuremberg, says that the aim of a negotiation is to enter into an agreement such that both parties have their needs satisfied and are motivated to fulfill their agreements and to enter into further negotiations with the same party in the future. This is a foundation law of negotiating and needs to be broken down into its constituent parts. First, the aim of a negotiation is to enter into an agreement. It's not necessary to win or to somehow outsmart the other person. The second part says, such that both parties have their needs satisfied. This means that an agreement where one or the other party feels that he or she has lost does not fulfill the basic requirement of a successful negotiation. The law then goes on to say, and are motivated to fulfill their agreements and enter into further negotiations with the same party in the future. This simply means that both parties are satisfied enough with the outcome that they're motivated to fulfill whatever commitments they've made, and they feel positively enough toward the situation that they're willing to negotiate again and enter into agreements in the future. The second law of negotiating is what I call Covey's Law, after Stephen Covey, who discusses negotiating in his book and his audio tape series, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. which says, in every ongoing negotiation, you should aim for a win-win solution or no deal. In other words, by following this law, when you enter into a negotiation, you should be clear in advance in your own mind that you will come out with a solution that represents a win for both parties, or you will simply refuse to make any deal at all. The first part of Covey's law says that both parties must feel as if they have won and had their needs satisfied. And part 2 of the law says, to reach a win-win agreement, seek for a third alternative that may be different from the initial positions of either party. When you're determined to achieve a win-win solution to a negotiation, and you're open and receptive and flexible in your discussions, you'll often come up with a third alternative that neither party has thought of initially, but which is superior to what either of you might have come up with on your own. For example, a husband and wife may want to take a summer vacation, but he's very adamant about going to the mountains and getting a chance to hike, and she's just as adamant about going to the beach and getting a chance to sit in the sun. One or the other could dominate this negotiation, or they could both stay home, all forms of win-lose, lose-win, and lose-lose. Or they could compromise and spend half their vacation in the mountains and half their vacation at the beach, leaving each of them dissatisfied for half the time. Now, the very best third alternative, however, might be to go to a city like Vancouver, British Columbia, where the mountains meet the sea. With this third alternative, during the day she could go to the beach and he could go to the mountains. They could both be together in the late afternoons, the evenings, and early mornings, and have a fully satisfying family vacation. This kind of third alternative solution is almost always available if you're willing to look for it. It simply requires a commitment to win-win negotiating. Once you've decided that you're only going to agree to a settlement that leads to satisfaction for both parties, it doesn't mean that you have to accept any arrangement that you consider second best. With your values and your intentions clear, you're now in a position to utilize every strategy and tactic available to you to get the very best deal that's possible for you. The third law of negotiating is what I call Cohen's Law, which comes from the book You Can Negotiate Anything by Herb Cohen, one of America's finest writers and speakers on the subject. His law is simply, everything is negotiable. When you look at life as one long, extended negotiating process, you find that almost every situation contains elements that you can negotiate to improve your personal level of satisfaction. The first part of this law says that established prices are just a best guess estimate of what the customer will pay. This means that asking prices are only loosely connected to reality. The cost of manufacturing and marketing a particular product or service has very little to do with the price that's put on it. Price is arbitrary and merely reflects someone's opinion of what the market will bear. The second part of this law says that any written price was written by someone and can be changed by someone. For example, I went into an expensive men's clothing store some years ago and looked at a beautiful $500 cashmere overcoat that had been marked down to $350 and which was prominently displayed on sale. I asked the sales clerk if they would sell that coat for $250. The clerk told me that was impossible. No one ever negotiated prices in this kind of store. What was written on the tag was the price, and it couldn't be changed. Well, I realized immediately that I was dealing with a person who had no authority, so I very politely wrote down the amount, $250, on the back of my business card and told him to give it to his manager, who was out for lunch at the time. My offer would stay open until 3 p.m. that afternoon. Then I went back to my office. At 2:30 p.m., the telephone rang, and a very surprised sales clerk told me that he had gone to his manager, and his manager had agreed to accept the amount of $250 for the cashmere coat. Even the sales clerk was astonished because he had no idea that everything is negotiable. The fourth law of negotiating is what I call Dawson's Law, which I've named after my friend Roger Dawson, and which comes from his best-selling audio program, The Secrets of Power Negotiating. Dawson's Law states that you can always get a better deal if you know how. Dawson's first comment on this law is, if you want a better deal, ask for it. The word ask is the most powerful word in the entire process of sales and negotiating. Most people are so paralyzed by the fear of rejection and disapproval that they're afraid to ask for anything out of the ordinary. You'll be quite astonished at the good deals you can get by simply asking for a lower price if you're buying and asking for a higher price if you're selling. For example, one of my seminar participants is a real estate salesman who goes out and looks at homes that have come on the market. Whatever the asking price, he offers 50 to 60% of that amount, and he offers cash with a very short time limit on the offer. Now, he gets turned down dozens of times. However, every so often, because of the seller's circumstances, the seller will accept his offer. He can then get a first mortgage for more than he's agreed to pay, which he promptly does, and then he either rents the house or resells it at a higher price. And his secret is simple. He simply asks people to sell him their houses at far lower prices than anyone else could ever imagine. Roger Dawson's second comment on this law is that whatever the suggested price, react with disappointment and despair. Roger Dawson suggests that you flinch no matter what the price or the offer. Appear as if you're in extreme pain and then ask, "Is that the best you can do?" and remain perfectly silent. Very often when you ask a person how much an item is and you flinch when they give you the price, they'll lower the price immediately. Roger Dawson's third comment on this law is, always imply that you can do better somewhere else. There's nothing that causes a seller's price to drop faster than for you to tell him that you can get the same item cheaper from another source. The fifth law of negotiating is the law of 4. It says that in any negotiation there are usually 4 main issues to be decided upon. The first part of the law of 4 says that 80% of the content of the negotiation will revolve around these 4 issues. This law of 4 and this factor of 80% turn out to be true in almost every case. I've spent 2 or 3 days negotiating a 40 to 50-page agreement full of clauses and subclauses and different details and terms and conditions, and at the end found that most of the discussion and the most important points of the negotiation revolved around 4 basic items. The second part of the law of 4 says that of the 4 main issues in any negotiation, 1 will be the main issue and 3 will be secondary issues. The law of 4 can be extremely powerful if the other party's order of importance of the 4 issues is different from yours. One party may be more concerned about price and the other party may be more concerned about terms. This can lead to an excellent win-win solution that satisfies the most important needs of each party. The sixth law of negotiating is the law of timing. It says that the timing of a negotiation can have a major impact on its outcome. Whenever possible, you must plan strategically and use the timing of the negotiation to your advantage. For example, when buying rental property, the smart negotiator will always arrange to take possession of the property before the beginning of the month. By doing this, the new owner will collect all the cash rents that are due and will start the period of ownership with money in the bank. The first part of the law of timing is that the more urgent the need, the less effective the negotiator. If you're in a real hurry to close a deal, your ability to negotiate well on your own behalf diminishes dramatically. The second part of the law of timing says that the person who allows himself to be rushed will get the worst of the bargain. You must be very alert to the fact that this is a well-known truth, and many people will try to get the best of you by running out the clock to the point where you absolutely have to have what you've discussed and agreed upon, and you often have to accept less than you had originally bargained for. The third part of the law of timing says that the last 20% of any discussion will contain the issues and items that account for 80% of the importance of the entire discussion. It always seems to be at the very end of a negotiation that the critical elements are resolved and agreed upon. A final point with regard to timing. Whenever possible, you should delay in making an important decision. At the very least, don't allow the other person or persons to rush you into a decision by suggesting that if you don't act now, it'll be too late. Use time as a weapon to strengthen your hand and to improve your ability to negotiate well. The seventh law of negotiating is the law of terms, which is a direct outgrowth of the law of timing. It says that the terms of payment can be more important than the price or almost any other factor. For example, I remember the first time I purchased a Mercedes. I told the salesman that there was no way I could afford it. The car was too expensive and my income simply wouldn't allow it. Of course, I'd purchased cars before and they'd all been financed over a 3-year period. The salesman came back immediately and said that because it was a Mercedes and it would hold its value, it could be financed over 5 years. He then calculated what the monthly payments would be on a 5-year amortization. As soon as I saw the number, I did a complete turnaround and agreed to buy the car, even though it was very expensive. The terms were more important than the price. The first part of the law of terms says that you can agree to almost any price if you can decide the terms. If you're negotiating and you really want to purchase the item, or sell it for that matter, and the price is the sticking point, shift the focus of your discussion to the terms and see if you can't negotiate terms that make it possible for the price to be more acceptable. Here's a true story that illustrates this strategy. 2 older businessmen owned land in the Tucson area, and one of them sold his land to a developer for the amount of $1 million. A developer friend of mine wanted to purchase the land belonging to the second businessman, which was not as good a piece of land, but the second gentleman also wanted $1 million. As a matter of pride, he didn't feel he could accept less than his friend had received for his land, even though the properties were quite different. In negotiating the terms, however, it turned out that the seller didn't need the proceeds from the land. In fact, they would harm his tax position. He was going to leave the land to his children and grandchildren anyway. So my developer friend agreed to pay $1 million for the land, but to spread the payments at a low rate of interest over a period of 20 years. On that basis, the real cost of the land was considerably less, but everyone ended up happy and satisfied. The terms were more important than the price. The second part of the law of terms says simply that you should never jump at the first offer. Even if the first offer is everything you could possibly ask for, don't accept it. Act just a little disappointed. Ask for time to think it over. Ponder the offer carefully. Realize that no matter how good the first offer is, it just means that you can get an even better deal if you're patient. The 8th law of negotiating is perhaps the most important of all. It's the law of preparation. It states that fully 80% of your success in any negotiation will be determined by how well you prepare in advance. I've said before that action without planning is the cause of every failure. Well, negotiating without preparation is the cause of just about every poor deal that you ever get. The very best negotiators are the ones who take the time to prepare the most thoroughly and to think through the situation completely before the negotiation begins. The first part of this law could be called Janine's Rule, from Harold Janine, the president of IT&T, during the period when it grew into an international conglomerate composed of more than 150 companies. He was adamant about this rule, which says, get the facts. You must also take the time to get the facts prior to any negotiating situation. Avoid the tendency to accept superficial answers or incomplete numbers. Don't leap to conclusions. Ask questions, listen carefully, do your research, and take notes. This can make an extraordinary difference to the outcome. The second part of the law of preparation says, do your homework. One small detail is all you need to succeed in a negotiation. A book by the famous trial lawyer Louis Nizer, entitled My Life in Court, explained how over a career spanning more than 100 major trials, he was able to win life and death cases for his clients because of the exhaustiveness of his preparation. Sometimes it was just one small fact that he'd been able to uncover in many hours of research that made all the difference. The third part of the law of preparation says, check your assumptions. Always ask, what are my assumptions and what if I was wrong? Remember, incorrect assumptions lie at the root of many failures. When in doubt, ask questions of anyone who can help you. As a simple example, one of the assumptions that almost everyone has when going into a negotiation is that the other party wants to make a deal in the first place. This may not be the case at all. You need to test this assumption. Sometimes the other party is only negotiating with you to increase his leverage with someone else. So, never assume. Here's another example. Almost everyone in sales is on a monthly quota. In the first half to 3/4 of the month, most salespeople are not too worried about reaching their quotas. If you go in at this time of the month, you'll assume that they want to make a deal. However, in the last week of the month, the pressure is on. You can almost always get a better deal in purchasing any large item if you do your tire kicking early in the month and you do your negotiating in the last couple of days of the month. Knowing that one small detail can give you an edge that can save or gain you hundreds, even thousands of dollars over the course of your negotiating lifetime. The 9th law of negotiating is the law of reversal. This law says that putting yourself in the situation of the other person first enables you to prepare and to negotiate more effectively. Before any negotiation of consequence or any negotiation that involves a lot of money or details, use the lawyer's method of preparation in reverse. Student lawyers are often given a case to either prosecute or defend as an exercise. They're then taught to prepare the other lawyer's case before they begin preparing their own. They sit down and look at all the information and evidence involved, and they imagine that they were on the other side. They prepare that side thoroughly with the full intention of winning. Only when they feel they've covered all the bases from the other point of view do they then begin to prepare their side of the issue. A good exercise for you is to sit down with a pad of paper and write down everything that you think may be of concern to the person with whom you're going to negotiate. Writing things down clarifies them in such a way that you can often see possibilities that you might otherwise have overlooked. When you've identified the major things that you think the other party will want, you can then decide what you'll offer in exchange, and where you're strong, where you're weak, and where there are possible areas for compromise. This type of preparation by reversal is the hallmark of the superior negotiator. Another tactic that you can use that's very helpful is to simply ask the other person at the beginning of the negotiation this question: why do you feel we are here, and what would you ideally like to accomplish in this discussion? This simple question will demonstrate to the other person that you're reasonable and open and interested in achieving a mutually satisfactory result. So just ask, why do you feel we are here, and what would you ideally like to accomplish in this discussion? The other person will usually be quite willing to answer this question, and you'll be amazed at the results. This brings us now to the inner game and to the 10th law of negotiating, the law of power. This law says that the person with the greater power, real or imagined, will get the better deal in any negotiation. And the first part of the law of power says that no one will negotiate with you unless they feel that you have the power to help them or hurt them in some way. The second part of this law says that power is a matter of perception. It's in the eye of the beholder. Negotiator Herb Cohen says that the 3 most important keys to negotiating are power, preparation, and timing. And of these 3, power is often the most important and the most influential. There are 10 different types of power that you can develop and use, either individually or together, to impress and influence the other party in any negotiation. The more important the issue to be negotiated, the more time you should take to consider how you can utilize one or more of these elements of power to strengthen your position. The first is the power of indifference. The party who appears to be the most indifferent to whether or not the negotiation succeeds often has power over the other person if that person has a greater stake in the outcome. Whenever possible, you should appear slightly detached and indifferent, as though you don't really care one way or the other. The second form of power is the power of scarcity. Whenever you can suggest or imply that the item you're selling is in scarce supply and that there are others who want it, so that the item will soon be gone anyway, you can influence the negotiation in your favor. The third form of power is that of authority. When you have an impressive title or you look as though you have the authority to make big decisions, this image alone often intimidates the other person and enables you to get a better deal. The fourth form of power is that of courage. You build perception of this power by being willing to take risks, by being willing to speak out clearly and forcefully, and by being willing to either put yourself on the line for this deal or walk away from it. The fifth type of power is that of commitment. When you appear totally committed to success in an enterprise, you radiate an aura of power that often causes people to cooperate with you and go along with you. The sixth form of power you can develop is that of expertise. The power of expertise comes from your making it obvious that you're extremely well informed on the subject under negotiation. A person who is perceived as an expert in any situation has power over those who don't feel as knowledgeable. The seventh form of power you can create is called the power of knowledge of the needs of the other. The more time that you take to find out exactly the situation of the other person, the more power you have in the negotiation. The eighth form of power is that of empathy. Human beings are intensely emotional in everything they do and say, and when they feel that the person they're negotiating with also has a high level of empathy with them and with their situation, they're much more likely to agree to something that's more beneficial to the negotiating party. By the way, every study of top negotiators shows that they are highly empathetic, low-keyed, solution-oriented, and pleasant individuals to do business with. The picture of the tough-talking negotiator is largely fictitious. Good negotiators are very nice people, and they make it clear from the beginning that they really care about reaching an agreement that everyone can live with. The ninth form of power that you can develop in negotiating is that of rewarding or punishing. When the other party perceives that you have the capacity to help them get something they want or to withhold something from them, they're often far more cooperative. And the 10th form of power is the power of investment, either of time or money or both. When you make it clear that you've invested a lot in the issue under negotiation, it gives you a form of power that you wouldn't have had if you had spent less time and effort. And if you know that the other person has invested a lot in the negotiation, it also gives you power. For example, when I purchased my current house, I sat down with the owner and told him personally that my wife and I had looked at more than 150 houses, and this was the first house that we decided to make an offer on. Now, even though the seller had only had the house on the market for a few weeks, he recognized immediately that we were serious, and he negotiated with us in a serious way, leading ultimately to a satisfactory sale for him and a satisfactory purchase for us. If we'd told him that this is one of the first houses we looked at, his attitude might have been completely different. In any case, your choice in negotiating is either to be influenced or to influence the other party. The more of these elements of power that you can bring to bear in a negotiation, the more persuasive and effective you will be. The 11th law of negotiating is the law of desire. It states that the person who most wants the negotiation to succeed has the least bargaining power. The first part of the law of desire says then that no matter how badly you want it, you should appear neutral or only mildly interested. The more important it is to you, the more important it is for you to appear unemotional, unaffected, and unreadable. Don't smile or appear really interested in any way. The second part of the law of desire says that the more you can make the other party want it, the better deal you can get. This, of course, is the essence of successful selling. Desire is a critical element. For example, Chinese jade dealers were famous for showing one item of jade jewelry at a time to a prospective customer. The Chinese, by long custom, would keep their faces completely unemotional and unreadable. However, when the jade dealer revealed a piece of jade that the customer really liked, the pupils of the customer's eyes would dilate widely. The jade dealer would be watching carefully for this, and when he saw the pupils dilate, he knew which item the customer wanted most and which item to negotiate on the hardest. The 12th law of negotiating is the law of reciprocity, which states that you are strongly motivated to pay people back for anything that they do for you. This law of reciprocity is one of the most powerful of all subconscious drives. There is within each person an intense desire to be even with others. If a person does something nice for us, we feel that we're under an obligation, and we seek every opportunity to do something nice back so that we can even the score. This law of reciprocity is most obvious in negotiating when the issue of concessions comes up. The first part of this law says that the first party to make a concession will be the party who wants the deal the most. You must therefore avoid being the first one to make a concession, even a small concession. Instead, remain silent. The first party to make a concession will tend to be the person who will go on to make additional concessions, and most purchasers or sellers are aware of this and recognize it, so be careful. The second part of the law of reciprocity says that every concession you make in a negotiation should be matched by an equal or greater concession by the other party. If the other party asks for a concession, you may give it, but never without asking for something else in return. If you don't request a reciprocal concession, the concession that you give will be considered to have little value, and it won't help you as the negotiation proceeds. Even if the concession is of no importance to you, always attach it to something else. The third part of the law of reciprocity says, make small concessions on small issues so that you can ask for reciprocity or large concessions on large issues. One of the very best negotiating strategies is to be willing to give in order to get. When you make every effort to appear reasonable by conceding on issues that are unimportant to you, you put yourself in an excellent position to request an equal or greater concession later. The 13th law, the walk-away law of negotiating, states that you never know the final price and terms until you get up and walk away. You may negotiate back and forth for a long time and haggle in detail over prices and terms, but you never really know the best deal you can get until you make it clear that you're prepared to walk out of the negotiation completely. The first part of the walk-away law says that the power is on the side of the person who can walk out without flinching. When you do walk out, always be pleasant, low-keyed, and polite. Leave the door open so that you can enter back into the negotiation with no loss of face. The second part of this law says that walking out of a negotiation is just another way of negotiating. Some of the very best negotiators, both nationally and internationally, are extremely adept at getting up and walking out. They will even leave the room, leave the building, the city, and even the country if necessary to strengthen their hand and increase their perceived power in a negotiation. It's quite common when teams are negotiating for 2 or 3 of the key players on one team to get up angrily, storm out of the room, and vow never to come back. However, they will leave someone behind who will then seek for some way to make peace with his partners and bring them back into the discussion. Sometimes this is called good guy, bad guy. Of the 2 types of negotiators, one will be hard and demanding, while the other will be friendly and accommodating. It's all part of the game, and you need to be aware of it in case anyone ever tries to use it on you. The 14th law of negotiating, the law of finality, states that no negotiation is ever final. Just because you've reached an agreement and it's signed, sealed, and delivered, remember the first law of negotiating, which says that the purpose of a negotiation is to enter into an agreement such that both parties have their needs satisfied and are motivated to fulfill their commitments and enter into subsequent negotiations with the same party. It often happens that once a negotiation is complete, one or both parties thinks of something or becomes aware of an issue that hasn't been satisfactorily resolved. Maybe circumstances change between the signing of the agreement and its implementation. In any case, one of the parties is not happy with the result of the negotiation. One party feels that he has lost. The first part of the law of finality says that if you're not happy with the existing agreement, ask to reopen the negotiation. Remember, most people are quite reasonable. Most people want you to be happy with the terms agreed upon in a negotiation, especially if the terms are to be carried out over a long period of time. If you find that you're not happy with a particular term or condition, before you go back to the other party, think of some of the reasons why it would be beneficial to the other party to make these changes. Don't be afraid to point out that you're not happy with this situation and that you'd like to change the agreement so that you feel it's more fair and equitable. The second part of the law of finality says, use zero-based thinking on a regular basis by asking yourself, if you had it to do over, would you agree to the same terms? To summarize these laws on negotiating, remember the bottom line of this entire session simply says that negotiating is a normal and natural part of life and that you owe it to yourself to become very good at it. As in anything else, the key to excellence is for you to practice at every opportunity. Make it a game. Ask for better prices and better terms, for better conditions and better interest rates and better everything. Realize that you can save yourself the equivalent of months and even years of hard work by learning how to become an excellent negotiator on your own behalf.